Today on Advancing with Amy, mental health warrior and neurospicy mama, we unravel the mysteries behind shadow work, exploring how our deepest, often abandoned parts can lead to personal breakthroughs or hold us back in burnout. We're speaking with Krissy Loveman, who dives into the fascinating interplay between the ego, persona, and shadow, shedding light on how these elements shape our lives. Listeners will discover how seemingly small habits can be transformed through the cutting-edge science of neuroplasticity, a revelation that promises rapid and rewarding personal growth. Krissy Loveman is a trauma-informed life coach who helps people build confidence and reclaim their power over self-defeating thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. Her specialty is coaching the conscious and unconscious mind to rewire neural pathways that create deep, lasting change. She places a special emphasis on deprogramming outdated notions that poor self-discipline or lack of willpower are the reasons we fail to change ourselves. She loves teaching how the brain and the nervous system drive our patterns and what to do about it. If you're yearning for a path to understand your true self and breaking free from the patterns holding you back, this is an episode you don't want to miss. Tune in for an eye-opening journey into the realm of unconscious transformation and learn the tools that can anchor you in a more authentic, fulfilling life. Krissy, I am very happy to have you here today. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Amy. I'm happy to be here too.
That's great. And I'm interested to talk with you because I know you work with shadow work, and that's something I'm very interested in. Can you start by telling us a little bit about what even shadow work is?
Yeah, I'll be happy to jump right into that. So, shadow work is something that a lot of people come into at a time in their life when they tend to start feeling very maybe exasperated or burnt out, or maybe they have a sense of emptiness that their life hasn't really been representative of who they are. So you often find people in midlife going into shadow work. I think a lot of times the midlife crisis is often an indication that some shadow work needs some attention there. But everyone has a shadow. It's a normal part of the human psyche. We all develop a shadow as we're growing up in conjunction with developing our ego and our persona, right? So the ego and the persona is who we see ourselves on the outside. It's how we present ourselves to other people. Our persona is very influenced by our environment growing up. So your family, your culture, the society that you're in. And it very much turns out that our persona is what makes us feel most accepted by others and by society and by our family. And as we were taught growing up, you should be this way, not this way, do this, not that. As we're learning and taking all this in as children, we develop this ego, but at the same time, without even knowing it, we're developing a shadow. And so all the parts of ourselves that aren't supposed to be automatically go into the shadow. And the shadow is a part of your unconscious. I like to describe the shadow as being like a receptacle in your unconscious that safeguards all of your abandoned parts, which is just a fancy way of saying if you grew up and you had um a love for the arts, but you grew up in a family that wanted you to go into business or law, you might abandon your artistic self. And it's not that it goes away completely, it's just like in hiding and it's in your shadow. And your shadow pokes at you throughout your life and it makes itself known in very indirect ways. So we have to come to terms with their shadow eventually, that there are these parts of ourselves that we have neglected, not because we're meaning to do harm to ourselves, but because we did what was necessary for our survival or what felt like survival, being accepted, doing what was expected of you by your family and your culture. And so the shadow, which I can go into, will make itself known to you in a lot of different ways. And then you either come to face it or you keep pushing it away. And that will obviously lead to a lot of grief.
Right. How does that, I'm curious, lead to burnout? You were mentioning burnout.
Burnout is just one example. If you're living a life that's not really the one that you truly desire for yourself, if it's not in alignment with what we think of as the true self. For example, a lot of people are familiar with going to med school, right, to become a doctor because that's what your family wanted, but you really don't care to be in that profession, one that definitely will burn you out. If you don't love it, if it's not what lights your heart on fire, you might find that you're gonna become burnout, right? Because it's misaligned with what you really want. And burnout could happen in a lot of other different ways as well, but I think when you push down what is true inside, it does affect you, affects your well-being, your mental health, right? Even your physical health. We know that stress affects the body physically. So it will make itself known one way or another.
Wow. And what kind of work do you do to actually process that?
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways to do shadow work. It can be very fun and creative. One way that we look at people's shadows is looking at how they project onto other people. And so this is one of those indirect ways that the shadow will make itself known is that people will project qualities in themselves that they don't take ownership of. They project them onto other people. And so you can project it happens kind of a couple different ways. You might project quote unquote positive qualities. I'm using air quotation marks here, or quote unquote bad qualities onto other people. So, for example, if you're someone who maybe has a low self esteem, you kind of live a small life, you're afraid to take big risks, you're afraid to be visible or vulnerable, you might really admire someone who does all those things. And you put them on a pedestal and you say, that person is so amazing, right? They're so brave, they're so smart. You basically lavish them with all these positive qualities and you almost like occupy yourself with just keeping them on the pedestal while you live this very small life and you're like, oh no, I could never do that. That's not me, that's them. So you project your own brilliance onto other people. This is a form of projection, actually. And you'll find that people who do that, they just kind of continue in this pattern of low self esteem and being totally unwilling to see that they could be taking different kinds of risk in their life that would make them feel better about themselves, that would make them realize that I am that brave person too. Whatever it is, if they admire someone who's very successful in their career or someone who is a public figure that they look up to, they may just live their life through them, in other words. That is a form of
Right.
projection.
And it sounds kind of sad because I'm thinking if you are sort of idolizing someone, it sounds
Right.
like, then you're not seeing the real them. And so you think they're so perfect and they're really
Totally.
not. Right.
Yes. And that is true too, right? You really see them only in a certain light, right? You're unwilling to see that they have their own flaws as well, right? And so the other way that we project into people, and this one's a lot more uncomfortable to work through, is where we project our quote unquote bad qualities onto other people. So the example I like to give here, which I think a lot of people can understand and wrap their head around, is the people pleasing types of people. So, what they might be known for is being very overly accommodating to other people, very helpful. They always want to, the person you can call up in the middle of the night to ask a favor, and then they will always say yes. And they just really put themselves out there to help other people, and it makes them feel good about themselves, right? It makes them feel like I'm accepted by others and people like me, right? There's a lot of wanting to be liked in people pleasers, right? So, whenever they cross paths with other people who have no trouble saying no, having boundaries, who don't bend over backwards to help other people, they may get triggered by them. Okay.
Right.
So what they do is they project onto those kinds of people and say they're so cold or mean or selfish or inconsiderate, right? All these qualities that they think that the people pleaser feels are so bad to have. So they project onto them and then they in their own life, they unconsciously overcompensate, so the people pleaser will do anything to avoid being seen or regarded as a selfish, cold, mean, inconsiderate person, right? So then they have all the things that I mentioned. They don't have very good boundaries. They always say yes, right? They don't know how to say no to people. They help people when they really shouldn't be, and it affects their health, right? They're
Right.
using up their precious time, energy, and resources to help other people and be that people-pleasing type, all because they can't stomach having to feel like someone may think that I'm being inconsiderate if I don't help or say yes or bend over backwards for others. And so that's a different type of projection onto other people. So they get really triggered by strong types of people who just love having boundaries and don't mind saying no or drawing the line when they need to. And so we'll look at why is that person triggering to you? We do a little deep dive and you can probably see how this might get a little uncomfortable to sit down and sit with that and think, wow, I'm the problem here. I'm projecting all of this onto other people and I actually need to step up for myself.
That does sound hard. So how long does it take someone to go through that process of working on that shadow work and giving up those kind of things?
It's a great question. So, in one sense, your shadow work never ends. We're all doing shadow work to the very end. We all could be because the shadow is just an integral part of who we are. But at the same time, you can make really significant strides in overcoming your shadow driven habits and patterns. And this is where the other side of the work that I do comes into play, which is much more focused and driven by neuroscience, is we understand how the nervous system kind of props up some of these patterns and these behaviors, and we work through those in a way that rewires the brain. And this is the fun, really exciting part of the work that we do. I specialize in neuroplasticity. So, this is your brain's ability to adapt and reorganize itself in response to experiences, emotions, thoughts. And that's just a fancy way of saying rewiring your brain when it comes to habits. Okay. So, I help people overcome their habits, whether it's habitually choosing the wrong people when you're dating, habitually having low self-esteem, being a habitual people pleaser, habitually having a lot of anxiety, maybe in your career or whatever it may be. We don't always think of these as being habits, but they are. That's what they are in your nervous system and in your brain. So there's a lot of different ways to work through those. Once we identify what the patterns are, maybe through doing the shadow work, then we know, okay, this is what needs attention. This is the patterns we want to work through. And we bring in all the good neuroscience tools to do that.
That's great. And I know that neuroplasticity is a big thing right now. And
It is.
yeah, it must be a very rewarding line of work, I would think.
It definitely is, and it's very exciting time to be doing healing, to be working in the healing industry because the neuroscience that's come out of the past 10 to 20 years has been just groundbreaking and really cutting edge. And so we just know so much more about how we tick than we used to. And the work that you can do with people now is incredible and it can be rapidly successful. And it's just very exciting and extremely rewarding to see such improvements in your clients who even people who've struggled with the patterns their whole life. Because we also know that neuroplasticity has shown us that everyone can rewire their brain no matter your age, which is really cool.
That is cool. I was just going to ask if you had had something you'd been doing your whole life and you're like, 60 years old or something. Can you still change?
You can, yes, yes. I always tell people if you're looking to work with a therapist or a coach, try to find someone who's really up to date with the latest neuroscience because they're going to really be able to do great work with you in a way that's, again, oftentimes surprisingly rapid and successful.
How do you find someone like that? Do you just Google
Yeah.
neuroplasticity? I mean, I don't know.
I think you probably could because neuroplasticity is entering the mainstream a little more. I think a lot of healers who have that specialization want to make it known that's what they do. Yeah, I mean, one thing you could do is just if there's someone you want to work with, is just asking them, like, hey, do you have any neuroscience in your training at all? Does that come into play at all? Just ask some questions to get a feel for what modalities they use. There's so many modalities out there, right? And they all work in their own unique way. But if you have a neuroscientific understanding of how your modality works best, then that's the sweet spot that you wanna look for.
And what modality do you work with?
I use a few different modalities. I love learning, so I'm always doing trainings and learning new things. I use some hypnosis with my clients. I teach my clients a lot of nervous system regulation tools, different types of somatic based tools that helps them help themselves when they're experiencing a habit or a pattern in real time. And I'm trained to talk with people a certain way through the art of the conversation to actually help rewire their brain. So there's so many different ways, right, that you can foster brain rewiring. And so I throw in a lot of different tools just depending on the person and what they're looking for and what they need.
That is so interesting. You were talking to me earlier, or I was talking to you about it, paradigm shifting. Can you talk about that a little bit? Is that the same as rewiring your brain?
Yeah, so I often talk about this type of work being paradigm shifting because I think that most people don't truly understand what makes them tick and what drives the way that they show up. We are creatures of habit and we are driven by emotion largely. And we have an understanding of how the nervous system is our operating system in a way that we didn't have even 20 plus years ago. And so I talk about this being paradigm shifting because what you learn is that a lot of our habits are coming from our unconscious, and it's happening at such a fast speed through internal processing in your brain and your nervous system that we don't realize it's happening, but it is, and it's happening all the time. And it's very validating to learn that, oh, I'm not a pleaser because I'm just a broken, weak person. It's because I have these habituated patterns in my nervous system that have been there probably since I was a small child, early childhood. And the same habits, these are neural pathways that repeatedly fire off over and over. And it's largely outside of my control in many ways. In other words, you don't just need more willpower, you need to be more self disciplined to be a better person in the world. You just need to understand how your nervous system is at the wheel and driving your patterns and then what to do about it so that you can change these habits. And so I think that people can feel better about themselves and stop shaming themselves and stop blaming themselves and feeling like broken people. Because a lot of people do feel that way. I'm a broken person because I've had this problem my whole life and I don't know what to do. And because the neuroscience is so recent on how to change habits, that even if you've been to a lot of therapy or whatnot, the knowledge may not have been there to really help you get to the root of the problem. But now it is. And more people, healers, coaches, and therapists know how to help people so that they can finally overcome their lifelong habits. And I think that's a huge paradigm shift for people to understand that, right? To just release all the shame that we have for all of our habits, even ones that feel like bad behavior, quote unquote, right? I also think that this work is paradigm shifting because when you learn what you need to do in order to change, it's surprisingly simple and easy, and and it works surprisingly quickly. So we are taught that you have to be in therapy for years and years, and then maybe you can crack the shell. But depending on what you're working through, of course, a lot of things don't need to be that difficult. And you don't need to like white knuckle your way through really tough exposure therapy and other things. Like there's just some really great ways to do this work that feels good and that will prove to yourself that, wow, I am a lot more capable of being the person I want to be than I thought.
Yeah, I like that. And I think that so many people think that, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to go to therapy forever and I'm going to have to reveal all this darkness inside of me and what's happened to me and that kind of thing. And you hear the
Yes.
word shadow work and you think that sounds dark. So it's so nice to hear it just explained that it's light and it can be something you enjoy.
Yes. And so much of it comes back to nervous system regulation where people act out their bad habits, whatever that may be, when you're feeling dysregulated. So you might be feeling anxious or feeling like you're carrying a lot of guilt or blaming yourself or having a lot of shame or having a lot of negative thoughts about yourself or being overly controlling or whatever it is, right? And what's really happening is we're experiencing that dysregulation in our nervous system. And what we want to teach your nervous system to do is to kind of re-anchor and reconnect. And that would just kind of brings the temperature down and all those negative feelings, right, that we have that drive why we do the bad things that we do, right, to ourselves and to other people. And so it does feel really good very oftentimes. And I don't always do shadow work with people. Not everyone wants to do that kind of work. It is uncomfortable, but it can be very rewarding at the same time. But it's not the only way to help people. There's lots of ways to help people, and it's not always going into the shadow, which, yes, it's not always fun to do.
Right. And so if somebody wanted to work with you, how would they find you?
I'm on Instagram, Krissy with a K, KRSSY .loveman is my username. I have my website, chrissyloveman.com. I'm very active in my newsletter. I love writing. I write articles as well on Tiny Buddha, and so I do a lot of long format writing, and Instagram isn't always conducive to long format writing, so I'm actually more active in my newsletter. I love to give my people a lot of just useful, helpful, good feeling advice every week and just reaching out to them in that way. So those are the places where I'm most active.
Okay, and how do they sign up for your newsletter?
So if you go to my website, there's a subscribe at the bottom of the homepage.
Okay,
Yeah,
great. And I'll put that in the show notes for everybody.
thank you.
And we've had a great talk here today. I've really enjoyed it. Is there something that you'd like to still say or leave our audience with?
It would just probably be a bit of a reiteration that no matter what you've struggled with throughout your life and how ashamed you may feel or guilty or self-blaming, that is not the truth of who you are. And I always like to say that we are all in a constant state of becoming. And given the right tools and the right framework, you can become more the person that you want to be. And that I like to say you truly are beneath all the patterns and conditioning that have been given to us. We are incredible beings underneath all that. And so I hope that you trust and believe that is there for you too.
Yes, that's a wonderful possibility that I want people to have that hope for. That's great.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Chrissy. I enjoyed talking with you today. I hope you have a great weekend.
Thank you so much, Amy. You as well.
As we wrap up today's episode of Advancing with Amy, it's clear that our conversation with Krissy Loveman was both enlightening and empowering. We've delved into the depths of shadow work, exploring how our unconscious habits shape us and how techniques like neuroplasticity can lead to meaningful and quick transformations. Krissy broke down the misconception that change requires years of traditional therapy, introducing us to innovative, science-backed methods that can rapidly rewire our brains. A big thank you to Krissy for sharing her expertise and for offering such hopeful and practical insights into personal growth and self-discovery. If you're interested in diving deeper into this work, I highly encourage you to visit Krissy's website at KrissyLoveman.com. That's KRISSYLOVEMAN.com. And there she has a whole page of freebies to help you learn everything from standing up for yourself to grounding and much more. Be sure to sign up for her newsletter for ongoing inspiration and tips. And if you found value in this episode, don't forget to share it with your friends, family, or anyone who might benefit from understanding the fascinating intersection of shadow work and neuroscience. Thank you for joining us, and I look forward to continuing this journey of growth and empowerment with you in our future episodes. Until next time, keep advancing, warriors.